Welcome back to Cricket Central, the podcast where we discuss all the stories, big and small. We're here for the days 2, 3, and 4 recap from the second test between Australia and West Indies from Adelaide, where Australia absolutely dominated the match and won by 419 runs. I think our biggest ever victory against the West Indies. To talk about it, we're from far afield. Today we've got Ethan in Melbourne, but we've got Navod coming live and clear from Colombo, Sri Lanka, while I'm over in the great state of South Australia. So, we're coming from all areas, but we've all been following a very successful match for the Australians. Just to quickly go through the last couple of days' play very quickly, we obviously had on day 2, Australia finally declare for 511 after Travis Head was rudely stitched up by Cam Green and run out for 175. Then we had in that night session, West Indies being 4 for 102 at stumps after Stark and Lyon bowled well in that first innings. And then on day 3, things really started to fall apart with the bat for the West Indies, with Chanderpaul getting run out by Mitchell Stark early on, and things just got worse and worse from there, getting all out for 110 in the end. It was almost a repeat of the Perth test, where there was really no need for Australia to be batting again, but just there was also no need to enforce the follow one. So I think they just thought we may as well give the crowd a bit of a show. And that they did in an interesting second innings, where, people were just going out there and slogging a bit. Usman Khawaja hit a good 45, some cameos from Labuschagne, Smith and Head again. And in the end, Australia declaring on 199, setting West Indies the impossible target of 497. Then last night we had yet again the Boland show in the second innings. Again, him picking up 3 for 16. Incredible show under the lights, meaning that they were 4 for 21 at stumps. So today it was really just a mopping up job, where the Aussies finished them off for just 77 runs, bringing on a tremendous victory, but one where, it hurts you to say it, but really the biggest story is just how far West Indies have fallen, I think you would have to say. But we'll start with the good stuff. Ethan, just a masterclass from the Aussies, surely, even with slightly different cast this time, showing our depth a bit.
Yeah, I think the Australian bowlers have done a fabulous job, even with 2 significantly major outs in Hazelwood and Cummins, who are arguably our 2 best bowlers, certainly by ranking. And we've, if anything, done a better job against this West Indies lineup, who did look a little bit tired, and they had their own selection issues, but it was a pretty complete performance. Everyone bowled economically. I think we saw the best of Stark, Boland, and Nisa, particularly in that second innings. And it was Nathan Lyon doing what he does best, an expert show of controlled but aggressive off spin, and Cam Green chipping in with a wicket as well. So really a pretty complete bowling performance from this Aussie attack. And it's good that Nisa and Boland have been able to come in and pretty much carry on the great work of the other Aussie quicks.
Yeah, for sure. Navad, I don't know how much you caught of it, but it was just remarkable seeing Scott Boland do it again last night, this time under lights. He just seems to hit that spot and is unplayable at times.
Yeah, I couldn't catch much viewing. I was following along on ESPN in the car, and because I went to a different part of Sri Lanka for 3 days, so I was following that along with great difficulty with no signal. But I did see all of Scott Boland's wickets fall, on the app, and yeah, it seems like from what I was reading, it seems like he was hitting that perfect line, that perfect length. And just it just really troubled the West Indian batsmen. So he's really a magical bowler, and I'm sure you'll get up the stats that he has. But Yeah, like a 10 average, 30 strike rate is just fantastic, and it really shows Australia's depth. Even Nisa as well. You know, sort of on the fringes of the side, but once he gets in and once Boland gets in, they perform, they show up, and it's really exciting to see how Australia's depth has continued. Once you lose the big players like Cummins and Hazelwood, you've still got those players that are still capable of playing at that test level, which is pretty incredible. So yeah, hats off to Boland and hats off to Nisa as well.
Yeah, and really becoming a second innings specialist. He's got an average of something like 4.3, I think, in the second innings of Test matches, and has got about, I think, 15 of his 21 wickets or something in that also. So, Ethan, really, I think he's shown even more that he'll potentially play a really important role for us in the Ashes next year. I think with that style of bowling that he has, and especially with the peak ball, which are under lights, which is more like English conditions. Do you think he could be a key part of our campaign next year?
Look, if he gets a game, I expect him to perform. Although it is unfortunately almost, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, very hard to see, I guess, a clear pathway for him to be into the side. I think we'll always pick Stark, Hazelwood, and Cummins, and Lyon for that matter, when fit. But I think we almost said the same last Ashes in England, and there was a bit more of a rest and rotation policy. Australia were very selective with which grounds they play particular bowlers at. But I mean, if you think Hazelwood is consistent with his line and length, Scott Boland, if anything, seems almost a step up from that. He's consistently been the most economical, and particularly for that triple wicket maiden that he bowled, almost every single ball is challenging that fourth stump channel at an uncomfortable length. And it just seems that he's got all the control in the world, and with a bit of movement, it's almost unplayable. So, certainly in terms of backup bowlers, I think he might be almost the best going around. And it's one of those cases where if he does make it into the side, it's very possible that he's going to be at the same level, if not maybe even a little bit higher than what we've got currently. But with the experience of our major quartet and their proven record, I think it's, unless there's an injury or a deliberate strategy to rest people for particular grounds, hard to say if he'll play a significant role or not.
Yeah. I guess Hazelwood's the one now that there's seems to always be questions over. I think he there's some talk he might be out for the entire South Africa series with his, I think, side strain or something. I think that he's got, and obviously coming off missing a lot of tests already. So yeah, I think there's a chance that he could get a shot there with injury. Just watching him the last couple of days, I think it's not only that he bowls such a consistent line, but he's actually very skillful at sort of the angles that he uses. A few cutters in there. Yeah, really very impressive bowler. And really all our bowlers were pretty impressive. I was there today, and Mitchell Stark was bowling as well as I've ever seen him bowl, really. Pitching it up a long way, getting a fair bit of swing. That ball to bowl Jason Holder was as good a one as you'll ever see. And then even Michael Nisa, he got in on the act also, getting three wickets for 22 in the second innings, to go along with 2 in the first, and pretty handy also. How did you rate those two, Ethan?
I think really they were both pretty simple traditional bowling, and it just worked against this sort of weakened batting attack. But one thing that should be stressed is that Australia were very, very good in the field and carry with the gloves as well. And really, any half chance was pretty much snatched up, particularly when Carey came up to the stumps and managed a couple of good grabs against Michael Neser. Really, the quality fielding and keeping made the bowlers' efforts really pay off. And they did pretty much exactly what you need to put it on a good spot consistently with a little bit of movement, with runs on the board on a day 4 wicket. That's really textbook Test match cricket. So it was just very, very good first principles from Australia. And where they've won the series, they've really outdone the West Indies in the basics. And it was good to see Neser and Boland, even though they are fringe players, really excel on those basics and do a lot right.
Yeah, 100%. And it would be amiss of us to not mention Nathan Lyon bringing up his 450th wicket. Also, so yeah, really very complete performance by the Australian bowlers, and well, the batting, we don't even really need to speak about that, with the exception of Warner, who we'll get onto in a second. Very impressive. But we'll flip across to West Indies side of things. And Navod, I'll give you the first shot on this, because I know you are well, that I think West Indies are your second team from what you've said. But well, today I was there at the game and was hoping to get at least a session, but in the end got just a little over an hour and a half. So I decided to stay along for the presentation ceremony at the end. And Craig Brathwaite, very interesting interview he gave there, where he was very honest about where West Indies are at, and he said that in the first test he thought that they showed a lot of fight, and he was pretty happy with their effort, at least if not the result. But he said that this test they didn't show any fight at all, and he seemed pretty disappointed with the way things are at there. Do you think that's a fair takeaway? And well, have the West Indies sort of taken another step down on the rung, and where is it going to end for the Windies? A lot of questions there, but I'll hand it across to you.
I'll do my best to answer them. I think definitely. I think the Craig Brathwaite's response is very fair. I think, and it's rightfully so. I think in the first test, I was very impressed. The batting efforts by the openers at the start, Tajerine especially, were absolutely fantastic. And then in the second innings, in their second batting innings, Craig Brathwaite with that absolutely brilliant century, and then Roston Chase, I think, with a 50 as well, and Tajerine contributing with something 40 odd. I can't exactly remember, but yeah, I thought they did actually put up a good fight, and the bowlers were good. I thought the bowling was a bit better this test for the West Indies, especially in that first innings, but definitely the batting for sure just collapsed, and couldn't put up anything really against the attack from Boland, Neser, and Stark, and Lyon as well. So very disappointing, and I think Craig Brathwaite is rightfully disappointed on how they played. I think going from the first test, when there was these glimmers of hope, obviously it was pretty unlikely that they were going to win any of these tests, but they outperformed my expectations for sure, especially in that first test. So yeah, I think Craig Brathwaite has to be rightfully disappointed. Have West Indies taken a step off the rung? I don't think so. I think that first test really showed that they can come here and be a little bit competitive. Obviously, they did lose the test and did lose this one quite substantially. But what I saw from the first test from the West Indians was something that really impressed me. I didn't really think they would. I really thought they would do something like they did in the second innings of this test, right? A 77 or a very low total, all out. But they managed to put on, I don't know how many runs, but it was quite impressive, right? Tajerine and Craig Brathwaite both contributing. Roston Chase with a 50 and a Craig Brathwaite 100. Craig Brathwaite has had, I think I saw a stat, the last 11 centuries have all been to Craig Brathwaite from the West Indies in Test cricket. So it shows you how much of a good player he is. And I don't think the West Indies have stepped down a rung. I think this is a really good learning lesson for them. I think they're trying to climb that ladder, but unfortunately a little bit slippy up there. So they need to just fix up a few of the things. I think batting is probably their main concern, and bowling as well. I think it's okay. I say main concern, but I think it is an all-round thing. There needs to be a bit, the bowling needs to be a bit better, especially in the spin department. Not choosing Rakeem Cornwall was probably an error in my opinion. Although Roston Chase did get runs, I think he wasn't the best of spinners. So maybe choosing Rakeem Cornwall would have been a better idea. And then batting, just the middle order is not great. It's let's be honest, it's not good at all. It's not test quality. Only the openers really were test quality for me, in my opinion, and the rest weren't that good. I think Joshua Da Silva is one of those players which I've kind of liked. He's done well in the West Indies, but so far he's yet to prove elsewhere. So yeah, in conclusion, after this long essay, I think West Indies rightfully have to be pretty disappointed with what they did, but whether they've stepped off the rung, I don't think so. I think they're just where they were before coming before into this test, and there's a lot to work on. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the West Indies.
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, I guess to support your point there, they did. We do have to say that they did have, I think it was 4 players out from their first test to the second test, and then Marquino Minley got injured and couldn't bowl. So they have had their fair share of bad luck in that second test as well. But Ethan, would you agree with that take, or would you be more pessimistic, less pessimistic, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think I largely agree. It's tough when your side really doesn't have the probably the genuine talent that other teams might have. I think looking at this list, there's a lot of players who on their day can probably come up with a great innings, but none of them really look like they'll have prolific, prolonged careers. I think there's a lot to be desired in their middle order. I think the openers are solid. But then when you get into Brooks, Blackwood, Thomas, even Mayers and Holder, it's a lot of mediocrity. Um, and I guess that's showcased by their averages, but certainly on their day capable of hitting that match winning 100. But maybe it's something to do with their own domestic system. But it's a lot of these players just don't have the application to really dig in and bat balls consistently. And it's tough going for the West Indies at the minute. I think on the bright side, their pace stocks, there's a little bit of promise there. I think Jaden Searles, Alzari Joseph, you can build a team around those sort of players. And it's good to see Taj and Ryan Chanderpaul have a pretty good series. So they do have some building blocks, but there needs to be a lot of rebuilding, particularly in their middle order, for them to be competitive against some of the bigger sides.
Yeah, the middle order really is the big thing. And I think you predicted before the series that your biggest surprise would be that the West Indies openers would hit more 50s than the rest of the team. And we can confirm you were correct about that, but only by a ratio of 2-1, actually. So you probably would have hoped that it would have been a bit more than that. Although Taj Nareen did get close on a couple as well. So it was maybe we could bring it up to four almost 50s there. I think the other thing you mentioned as well, I think this series shows the real decline of Jason Holder. I think we sort of knew it already, but really with the ball, I guess he wasn't bad. He did keep it very tight. I mean, his economy is still very good, but I think only 1 wicket for the series. And then with the bat, especially in the circumstances he was coming in, you would expect someone of his experience, a past captain, to sort of show a bit more grit than he did. I mean, I think the thing we'll remember from his batting will be that dismissal to Travis Head in Perth in the first test. So, Navod, do you think it's perhaps time for the Windies, like a new coach coming in now? We don't know who it's going to be, but I think Simmons is on the way out, isn't he? Is it time to maybe transition past Holder or other or players like that? I guess the question is, who do you go to? But is that something we might see?
I think, yeah, new coaching is definitely something that needs to be looked at for the West Indies. I think it's something that doesn't just sit with Test. I think it transcends all formats for them. But for me, I think Jason Holder is an interesting one because he was such a good player all those years ago, and it's hard to say because I really like him as well as a player. But I definitely think he's one of those cricketers who's sort of come to a decline, whether that's in mentality or how he plays. I think definitely there needs to be something to be looked at by coaching. And for me, I think the West Indies cricket, even the selection, the coaching, is a little bit of a mess to me. It's not really well organized. There are some odd selections. It's just all around pretty wacky. So I think that definitely needs to be addressed first. I think that's not only, as I said, not only just for Test, but for T20 and ODI. So we'll have to see. But in terms of Jason Holder, it might be time for him to call it, but I'd certainly not hope so. He is quite talented. He's quite tall, naturally tall, so he gets that good bounce. And yeah, we saw how effective he was, I think 2018 around that time. So if he can just rechannel that sort of energy, then it'd be smooth sailing for the West Indies. But unfortunately, he hasn't got that at this stage. So yeah, we'll have to see how he goes and what the West Indies choose to do with Jason Holder.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the wacky tactics as well, because that might be my last question. Some of the bowling tactics in this match were very interesting, to say the least. I think bowling to Travis Head wide outside the off stump, and hoping that will get you a wicket, probably not the greatest idea. And I think it was almost sad in a way, because Alzari Joseph had a pretty good match with his bowling. I thought he bowled much better than in the first match. His pace was up and bowled some great bowls. But Ethan, he just there just didn't seem to be enough consistently of it. Do you think that would be fair? And too many balls that were just too easy to hit. Do you think that would be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's he's a very hyped up bowler, potentially with a lot of promise, who has never really hit the mark in Test cricket. I think his best bowling in an innings is 3 wickets, and he averages around probably high 30s with the ball. So he's never really set Test cricket alight, despite having that extra yard of pace and occasionally putting it in quite a good area. So I thought we saw signs of his potential in that test, but it is a control thing. If he can work out how to consistently get the ball in that key area that Scott Boland and Josh Hazlewood often hit, it's almost going to do him a world of good. I mean, with other pace bowlers who are a little bit quicker, like maybe an Anrich Nokia, you can get away with bowling quite loosely if you have that extra yard of pace. But certainly, you do need to counter that, the ability to build pressure. Otherwise, the batsmen feel like they can dominate you and almost dictate terms. So he's relatively young at 26, so he's got a little bit of time to really work on his test game. But certainly, I think you can build a team around a player like that, and he certainly shows a little bit of grit there. So it was good that even though the entire team probably wasn't on the ball this test, that he managed to step up. And I think with a little bit of work, maybe with some new coaching, he might be able to really hone in on that accuracy and find that line of length that gets him some more wickets.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. And at least he is someone that you can think, okay, if we stick with him, he could be something special. Okay, well, we'll be talking about the negatives of West Indies. For Australia, as we say, there were so many positives. Obviously, across the series, we do just have to quickly mention Marnus Labuschagne, 502 runs at an average of 167.3. He became the fastest person since Don Bradman to 3,000 runs. He bettered Matthew Hayden's record for most runs in a two-test series. Even better than that, that was the Zimbabwe series, where I think Hayden scored a 380 or something. So quite an impressive feat for Marnus to do better than that. Obviously, Smith scoring runs in the first match, Head in both matches. But the player that sticks out like a sore thumb is David Warner, who really struggled yet again in this match, scoring 21 and 45. Is that right? Yeah. Oh, no, not 45, 21 and 28. I didn't think that was right. And really, the first time that I've looked at him and thought that maybe he is actually coming to the end. Just some of his decision making didn't look so good there. First off, Navod. Well, actually, Ethan, I'll go with you first. What did what is there to say about Warner? Where do you think he is at the moment?
I found the commentary on his first innings quite interesting, actually, because they seemed to think he was really on top of the game and in the zone. I think Langer was commenting on his loud calling, and he probably
Yeah.
played. There was one over that played, I think, 3 drives through the offside. And I remember thinking, I'm not convinced by this at all. Just from the actual foot movement itself, I think it was you can put away bad bowling, but as soon as one ball was in a half decent spot, he managed to fall pretty much straight after that flurry of boundaries. So really, I mean, I don't think his batting is that dissimilar to Jason Holder's, really. I mean, it looks quite nice technically when the shot's played, but the lack of movement of the front foot I find very concerning, even against these West Indies bowlers who are markedly less quick than what we'll get next series with South Africa. So, I mean, he's clearly a very good batsman with his hand-eye and his ability to play different strokes. But I do wonder whether that lack of front foot movement will have its repercussions. And as we saw in that first innings, as soon as you drift one wide or maybe pull your length back a touch, he does seem vulnerable to me. So, I mean, that might be a technical change that can be fixed. But at this stage of his career as well, you do wonder if teams will, start to figure him out. And I think he's had issues with express pace in the past. So this South Africa series might be a big one for him, cementing his spot in the side. Particularly, there's been a few Australian bats at the domestic level who've started to put their hand up as well. So, I mean, honestly, the Australian openers have been underwhelming this series, even though we have dominated. I think Brathwaite and Tajaran Chanderpaul have probably outdone them. I think they've got 3 out of the top 4 highest opening stands. And while the performances will go under the radar, I think there are questions about, or to be asked of Dave Warner in particular, given the form of batsmen's 3, 4, and 5 in Labuschagne, Smith, and Head.
Yeah, no, it's a good point you make about the openers, and I guess Warner's never really been someone who moves his feet a huge amount, but I think you're right. Now it does look even worse and just doesn't look balanced at all. Navod spoke a little bit with after the first day about some of the external things that we've been hearing dealing with Warner lately, and that do you think potentially sort of the pressure to score runs and all the external noise, could it be getting to him a little bit?
I think, of course, that's with anyone with something like the captaincy being discussed in the nature that it was, will affect someone and then how they play the game mentally. But I think Warner's someone who's had a lot of experience playing cricket. He's been playing for a long time, so I think someone of his experience would be able to sort of drone out those outside thoughts, and when they're playing their test cricket, really focus in on what they're doing. For me, I think it's one of those things where Warner's sort of in his Aaron Finch sort of era. He's coming to a decline, as Pearson's lovely favorite phrase is,
Oh, no.
in regards to Adil Rashid, which I think is wrong. But yeah, I think Warner's coming to that stage of his career when it's time to maybe think of retiring. I think since that Pakistan series in 2019, 2020, his average has been somewhere in the low 20s. So pretty disappointing and pretty abysmal for someone who we know can score those big runs, and is quite has had quite a prolific career. These last 3 years or so have been pretty disappointing for him. So I think it may be coming to that stage where he needs to consider whether he wants to keep playing Test cricket. I think, as Ethan said, there are things that you could fix, like technique and form. I think technique actually is pretty good. It's more, it's just more how he's playing the ball, his footwork, things like that. But then again, he's also at that stage where he could retire. He's quite old. I don't know what he's thinking. He probably wants to be captain, obviously, as we've heard in the media this week. So that probably indicates to me he's on for a few more years. But yeah, we'll see how he goes. I think for me, he's in a little bit of a decline. Yeah, I'll say I think I can comfortably say that, unlike Adil Rashid. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, as you said. Had a great career. Just moving on to the other player who was probably a little disappointing, well, more than probably, and it does hurt me to say it, and I know it will hurt you to say it, Ethan, but that is that man, Cameron Green. Well, what didn't he do wrong in this match, apart from taking a good catch? But he was out for 9 in the first innings after off 42 balls. And I think we commented at the time that he was making Alzari Joseph and Jason Holder look like the great West Indian pacers of old, and not like people who had only just got 10 wickets in, I think, the the third innings of Australia's batting. And then second innings didn't do much better with 5. Obviously, there was running out his teammate of Travis Head on 175 as well. Bowling got a couple wickets, but was quite expensive. A tough test for him, Ethan.
Yeah, I always found in the nets, when I bowled to the number 11 batsman, I felt like a much better bowler. It felt like the same balls that were getting smacked for 4 it just appeared as these magical nuts of deliveries. And I think that's how the West Indies felt about bowling to Cameron Green. They were probably screaming to Brathwaite saying, "Give me the ball in my hand." I think he's probably short on confidence as much as anything, short on form. If I'm right, there hasn't been a lot of build up for him into this series because of the T20 World Cup. So he hasn't had that ability in the Shield season to go out and whack hundreds for fun. And I mean, it was really good to see his reaction after that catch, actually, because that gives you an indication, I suppose, about how in the game you are and how, I guess, confident you are as well. Yeah, his bowling's is still a work in progress, I'd say. He had a very good Ashes campaign, but in all formats, really, he's sort of known for having that a bit of a looseness to him and a bit of high economy play. But yes, the batting needs the most work. He's got good stroke play, but I don't think he's quite picked up the pace of Test cricket yet. We've seen at times he looks uncomfortable at the crease, not knowing whether to be defensive or aggressive. And really, the best innings he's played are sort of batting for a declaration, but not slogging like we saw in this Test. So I think he just needs time to figure out an actual plan. But it is interesting to think how much of an opportunity will we give someone like that? I think with the position that the team's in now, being ranked number 1 and being or seeming fairly comfortable at home, that's probably to his advantage. But he does need to start figuring things out because, I mean, he's not exactly the new kid on the block anymore. It's been a couple of summers of this, so we'll hope he'll figure it out sooner than later. But certainly a good talent that we want to look after.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. He's interesting because he's had so many great innings but so many different types of innings as well. Like we think about just a couple of months ago, we were talking about how he was the new star T20 batsman for us after he smashed everyone over in India. But now, he looks like he couldn't score a run, in B grade or something. And yeah, he never seems to have it to get it all together consistently, which I guess is just a sign of his youth and inexperience. But a tough test for him nonetheless.